Ladies and gentlemen, every real change in life begins with awareness. You cannot transform what you cannot see. Awareness is the light that exposes the patterns, beliefs, and habits shaping your reality. Most people move through life on autopilot, repeating the same routines, reacting to the same problems, and feeling trapped by the same emotions. They wonder why nothing changes, but they never pause long enough to examine the story they're living. Awareness is the first step toward rewriting that story. If you truly want to change your life, you have to stop and look honestly at where you are right now. Not with judgment, not with excuses, but with clarity. Where are you emotionally, financially, spiritually, physically? What patterns have brought you here? Awareness is not about blaming yourself. It's about understanding yourself. You cannot grow beyond your level of self-awareness. Until you see the truth about your thoughts and behaviors, you'll keep repeating them. Think about it like this. Every human being lives according to an internal map, a set of beliefs and rules created by their past experiences. Maybe your map tells you that success is hard to achieve, that love always ends in pain, or that you're not good enough to reach your goals. That map controls your decisions, your emotions, and your results. The problem is, most people never stop to question whether the map they're following actually leads where they want to go. Awareness allows you to step outside that automatic program and see the map for what it is, a story, not reality. When you become aware, you begin to separate who you truly are from the patterns you've been living. For example, you might realize that your constant stress isn't caused by your job, but by your belief that you must please everyone. Or that your lack of progress isn't because opportunities are missing, but because fear has been steering your choices. These realizations can be uncomfortable, even painful, but they are also liberating, because once you see the truth, you can no longer be controlled by it. Neuroscience supports this idea. Studies show that when you bring awareness to unconscious behaviors, your brain creates new neural pathways. That means the very act of noticing your patterns begins to rewire your brain for change. You're not stuck the way you are. Your brain is adaptable. The problem isn't that change is impossible. It's that most people are unaware of what needs to change. Awareness also expands your emotional intelligence. When you start observing your thoughts instead of being consumed by them, you realize you have a choice. You can choose your response, your focus, and your interpretation of events. For instance, two people can experience the same setback. One sees it as failure, the other sees it as feedback. The event is the same, but their awareness determines the meaning, and meaning determines your emotional state, which ultimately determines your actions. In practical terms, awareness begins with small steps. Start by paying attention to your inner dialogue. What do you tell yourself when things go wrong? Do you use words of encouragement or criticism? The way you talk to yourself shapes your emotions more than any external situation. Notice your emotional patterns. What triggers your frustration, your sadness, or your motivation? Each emotion is a signal, not an enemy. It's trying to show you something about your needs or your perspective. You can also increase awareness by journaling daily, reflecting on your wins and challenges, or simply spending 5 quiet minutes observing your thoughts. The goal is not to silence your mind, but to understand it. Once you understand it, you can direct it. When you know your patterns, you can interrupt them. When you see your limiting beliefs, you can replace them with empowering ones. When you recognize that your story is no longer serving you, you can begin to write a new one. One of the most powerful exercises Tony Robbins often teaches is asking better questions. Your mind is a search engine. It will find answers to whatever question you ask. If you constantly ask, "Why does this always happen to me?" your mind will find evidence that confirms your helplessness. But if you ask, "What can I learn from this?" or "How can I grow through this?" your awareness shifts towards solutions. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Ultimately, awareness gives you back your power. It allows you to move from being a passenger in your life to being the driver. Without awareness, you live by reaction. With awareness, you live by intention, and that single shift from unconscious living to conscious choice is what separates those who repeat their past from those who create their future. So if you truly want to change the story of your life, start with this one practice. Become aware of your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, and your beliefs. Look at them honestly, not to criticize, but to understand. Because the moment you see clearly, the moment you realize that you have been the author of your story all along, that is the moment your life begins to change. Awareness is the first chapter in your transformation, and once you open your eyes to it, you can never go back to sleep. Every turning point in life begins with a single decision. Decisions shape destiny more than any condition or circumstance. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your life. Yet most people don't realize how powerful this truth is, because they think decisions are simply about choosing between two options. In reality, decision-making is an art and a science. It's the process of mastering your focus, your standards, and your emotional state so you can consistently move toward the life you want instead of being pulled by fear, doubt, or distraction. Every day, you make hundreds of small decisions: what to eat, how to respond to someone, whether to take a risk or play safe. On the surface, these choices may seem insignificant, but over time, they compound into habits, and habits form identity. The science behind decision-making reveals that the brain seeks to conserve energy by relying on automatic patterns. This means that unless you become intentional about your choices, you'll default to what feels comfortable, not what leads to growth. The most successful people understand this. They train themselves to make decisions aligned with their values, not their moods. Decision-making begins with clarity. You cannot make an effective decision if you're unclear about what you truly want. Many people say they want success, but they haven't defined what success means for them. They drift through life reacting to whatever shows up, instead of consciously creating what they desire. Clarity creates power. When you decide exactly what you want, not what society expects, not what others think you should want, your decisions gain direction. You stop scattering your energy across meaningless pursuits and start focusing it like a laser. Emotion plays a vital role in every decision. Science shows that humans rarely make choices based purely on logic. Emotions drive our actions far more than we realize. That's why Tony Robbins teaches that the key to powerful decision-making is mastering your emotional state. You can't make a high-quality decision from a low-energy emotion like fear or frustration. When you're in a state of gratitude, confidence, and purpose, your brain literally accesses different neural networks that allow for creativity and problem-solving. If you want to make better decisions, first shift your state, stand tall, breathe deeply, focus on what's working rather than what's missing. From that empowered state, clarity and courage follow. Another critical aspect of decision-making is commitment. Most people confuse interest with decision. They say they've decided to change, but what they really mean is that they're interested in change as long as it's convenient. A true decision means cutting off all other possibilities. The word decide comes from the Latin decidere, which means to cut off. When you truly decide, you eliminate the option of going back. You remove the safety net. You tell your brain, this is happening no matter what. That level of commitment changes how your mind works. It begins searching for ways to make the decision successful rather than excuses to quit. In practical terms, one way to strengthen your decision-making is by setting clear standards. Every decision becomes easier when you have predefined values guiding you. For example, if your standard is integrity, any choice that compromises it is instantly rejected. If your standard is growth, you'll naturally lean toward opportunities that challenge you, even if they scare you. Most confusion in decision-making doesn't come from lack of options, it comes from lack of standards. When you know your non-negotiables, you save mental energy and build confidence in your choices. A powerful decision also requires courage. Every meaningful decision involves risk, the risk of failure, rejection, or discomfort. But here's the truth: indecision is far more dangerous than making the wrong decision. When you hesitate, you give away momentum. Progress happens through movement, and movement requires choice. Even if you make a mistake, you can adjust and grow. But if you stay frozen in doubt, you learn nothing. Successful people aren't those who never make mistakes. They're the ones who make decisions quickly, learn rapidly, and keep adjusting until they succeed. There's also a psychological phenomenon called decision fatigue. The more decisions you make in a day, the harder each one becomes, because willpower is a limited resource. This is why great leaders and achievers simplify their daily routines. They automate small choices: what to wear, what to eat, when to work, so they can focus their energy on the big decisions that truly matter. You can apply this principle too. Simplify your environment, delegate minor choices, and protect your focus for the moments that define your future. Ultimately, decision-making is not just about choosing, it's about creating. Every decision sets a direction, and every direction creates momentum. The moment you decide with certainty, the world around you begins to shift. Opportunities that were invisible start appearing because your mind is now tuned to notice them. That's not luck, that's focus. When you combine clarity with commitment and courage, your decisions become forces of creation rather than reactions to circumstance. If you want to change your life, you must stop waiting for perfect conditions and start deciding who you will be today. Decide to grow, decide to act, decide to lead your mind instead of letting your fears lead you. The science of decision is the science of transformation, because every breakthrough begins when you finally say, with absolute conviction, enough is enough. This is who I am now. And once that decision is made, your story begins to change. Change is one of the most natural and inevitable forces in life, yet it is also one of the most resisted. People often say they want to change, to become healthier, wealthier, happier, or more fulfilled, but very few actually do. Why? Because real change doesn't happen at the level of behavior. It happens at the level of psychology. Until you change your mindset, your patterns, and the meanings you attach to your experiences, your life will always return to the same place. The psychology of change is the understanding that transformation is an inside-out process. It begins in the mind, not in the circumstances. At its core, the human brain is designed to seek pleasure and avoid pain. This basic principle drives almost every decision and reaction you have. If you link more pain to change than to staying the same, you'll stay stuck, no matter how much you say you want to grow. For example, someone might want to lose weight but subconsciously associates dieting with pain, restriction, hunger, failure. At the same time, they link pleasure to comfort foods and relaxation. The result: their mind resists the very behavior that could transform their life. The secret to lasting change lies in reversing these associations, linking massive pleasure to progress and massive pain to stagnation. Once your brain believes that staying the same is more painful than evolving, change becomes automatic. But change also requires understanding the power of identity. Every action you take is filtered through your sense of who you believe you are. If you see yourself as lazy, unlucky, or not good with money, your subconscious will sabotage any effort to behave otherwise. This is why willpower alone never works for long. You can push yourself to take new actions for a while, but if your identity remains the same, you'll eventually revert to your old patterns. To create true transformation, you must upgrade your identity. Start seeing yourself not as someone trying to change, but as someone who already embodies that change. Tell yourself, I am a disciplined person, I am someone who follows through, or I am a leader who takes charge of my destiny. Your brain begins to align your behavior with that identity because it always seeks consistency between who you think you are and what you do. Emotions also play a huge role in the psychology of change. Logic may tell you what you should do, but emotion determines what you will do. People don't change because they should, they change because they must. Something inside them snaps, a realization, a painful experience, a breakthrough moment that creates emotional leverage. That's why Tony Robbins often says, change happens in an instant, the moment you make a real decision. The challenge is getting yourself to that emotional point where you are no longer willing to tolerate the old story. Education can accelerate this process by giving people tools to understand their emotions, not suppress them. When you learn how emotions work, that they are signals, not enemies, you begin to use them as a guide rather than an obstacle. Another psychological barrier to change is uncertainty. The brain is wired to prefer the familiar, even if the familiar is painful. It perceives uncertainty as danger because in ancient times, uncertainty could mean death. But in the modern world, uncertainty often means growth. Every new opportunity, a job, a relationship, a skill, begins in the unknown. The people who change their lives the most are not those who eliminate fear, but those who learn to act despite it. They build what psychologists call emotional resilience, the ability to stay centered even when the outcome is uncertain. This resilience comes from a shift in meaning. Instead of seeing uncertainty as risk, they see it as adventure. Instead of seeing failure as humiliation, they see it as feedback. This simple mental reframe turns obstacles into opportunities and discomfort into progress. Education strengthens this ability by training the mind to interpret experiences differently. For instance, learning about growth mindset, the idea that intelligence and ability can be developed, changes how people respond to failure. Instead of thinking, I'm not smart enough, they begin thinking, I can learn this. Instead of I always mess up, they think I'm improving with every attempt. This shift in thinking transforms persistence, confidence, and outcomes. It proves that the psychology of change isn't about positive thinking. It's about accurate thinking. It's about understanding that change isn't something that happens to you. It's something that happens through you. One of the most powerful ways to create change is through what psychologists call pattern interruption. Every behavior you repeat follows a specific pattern, a trigger, a response, and a reward. When you interrupt that pattern, you create space for a new one. For example, if you tend to procrastinate when stressed, you might break the pattern by taking a walk, listening to uplifting music, or doing 5 minutes of focused work immediately. The goal isn't perfection, it's momentum. Small changes in behavior build new neural pathways, and over time, those pathways become habits. Once a habit is formed, it no longer requires effort. It becomes part of who you are. Ultimately, the psychology of change teaches one profound truth. Change doesn't take years. It takes a moment of decision followed by consistent action. The moment you fully commit to a new identity, new meaning, and new habits, your life begins to shift. The reason most people fail is not because they can't change, but because they never fully decide to. They keep one foot in the past and one in the future, waiting for perfect conditions. But perfection never comes. The secret is to start, to take one powerful action that proves to your mind